Imagine yourself and your family being swept away by a tidal wave of water. You're being thrashed mercilessly by the powerful water push, and everything around you is seemingly disappearing into a whirlpool, taking in everything and anything that you have ever owned, even your life. More than 50 years ago, a humongous flood took away the lives of as many as 125 people, leaving countless others injured, homeless, and devoid of families. And did you know that all of this disaster was attributed to an act of man rather than God? We invest our utmost efforts into bringing you stories of unbelievable real-life incidents. In this video, we're going to be sharing a mining incident that caused an unimaginable outcome that you wouldn't believe could ever happen. We try our very best to provide you with well-researched information. If you want to support us, please take a second to click and subscribe. This is going to help and motivate us to bring more valuable content to your fingertips. The Buffalo Creek Valley. The Buffalo Creek Valley is a series of communities built upon the coal mining industry along the banks of a small stream known as Buffalo Creek. It's located in Logan County in West Virginia, famous for its coal mining operations in the United States. The county has also been highlighted for a number of disasters that it has faced in the long series of tragedies that coal corporations have perpetrated upon the people. A close look at Buffalo Creek illuminates the region's ties to coal. West Virginia became the coal mining child of the nation as it flourished between the mid-1800s and early 1900s. Logan County coal became easily transportable in 1904 after the completion of the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad line from Charleston, West Virginia. By the 1970s, the Buffalo Mining Company, a Pittston Coal Company child corporation, owned the mines and the mining operations along Buffalo Creek. The Buffalo Mining Company built, or rather put together, a series of dams along the middle fork of Buffalo Creek. These dams along Buffalo Creek are called coal refuse dams, or coal slurry impoundments. They were created using coal mining waste and sludge from good coal as it was washed, giving the dam the possibility of slipping. And that is what actually and clearly happened. The dam slipped and caused a disaster that was to be mourned for decades to come. They fell, creating a tide of coal sludge that killed 125 people, most of whom were school children. Disaster strikes. On the unfortunate morning of February 26, 1972, a traced pattern of human misery and suffering hit the people and counties of West Virginia when the uncalled-for disaster struck in the early morning hours. The people, busy in their morning routines with little warning, were swept away in a ferocious tidal wave of black wastewater that the wobbly dams couldn't hold. The loose tidal wave caused destruction of unimaginable magnitude upon more than a dozen communities in Buffalo Creek Hollow in Logan County. The flood, known more famously as the Buffalo Creek disaster, is considered one of the worst disasters in United States history. More than 130 million gallons of dark floodwater and wastewater from the coal mines tore down through the hollow, leaving behind hundreds of homes and vehicles destroyed, thousands of people homeless, and around 144 people, men, women, and children, dead by the end of it. One of the survivors, Shirley Markham, remembers that the only warning she got was from a lady neighbor, and recalls, quote, "The only warning we had was just a neighbor woman had spotted it and just pulled in front of our house and hollered, 'Run! The dam is broken!' And then you could hear the roar of it, and you could see it. I saw my neighbors' houses leave. I watched them crumble. I saw trees, logs, cars, slate, slush, you name it, and it was in that." Disaster in the making. Buffalo Mining Company's Dam Number 3 was already marked as a problem area and was well known around the creek. The people were already worried about the potential failure of the dams on the Middle Fork. It was clearly apparent, as one resident wrote a letter to the authorities in 1968 regarding the fears that the people faced as a community living close to the vulnerable dams. Pearl Woodrum of Saunders wrote a letter to the governor expressing his concerns over the potential disaster. He wrote, quote, "Every time it rains, it scares everyone to death. We are all afraid we will be washed away and drowned. Please, for God's sake, have the dump and water destroyed. Our lives are in danger." Later, in 1971, the dam was inspected, with findings stating, quote, "lack of emergency spillway or overflow system from upper impoundment." The mining company knew that their dams were not considered safe by the Division of Water Resources as late as a couple days before the tragedy occurred. Yet, they failed to alert the people. They acknowledged that Dam Number 3's overflow pipes were blocked. Hence, the whole episode is considered a deliberate attempt to conceal the facts from the oncoming disaster. When the water level started to rise on February 26th, officials failed to warn the people in Buffalo Creek Valley. As quoted by Big John Bailey, who was killed by the floodwaters on February 26th, quote, "We've worked long and hard for the big coal operators, and they're thanking us by killing us." On the fateful morning of February 26, 1972, as feared, Dam Number 3 collapsed at around 8 a.m., pouring 132 million gallons of water down the Buffalo Creek Valley. The water swayed downwards in a 20 to 30-foot high tidal wave at about 7 feet per second. This flood traveled over 17 miles in 3 hours, destroying all 17 communities that came in its way. By 8:15, all the water that was held by Dam Number 3 had been emptied onto the Buffalo Creek Valley. By 11 a.m., the wall of water reached the last of the 17 communities, the town of Man. There, it took approximately 2 hours to drain into the Guyandotte River. Man became the headquarters of recovery for the people of the valley. The magnitude of the disaster. A total of 144 people were killed in the flood, while 7 were never accounted for after the disaster. 1,119 people were physically injured by the floodwaters. Approximately 4,000 people were left homeless when 507 homes were destroyed, 273 homes were left with significant damage, and 44 mobile homes were completely destroyed. 10 bridges and hundreds of miles of roads and highways were destroyed in the flood. The destruction left behind in the valley after the water receded would take years to recover from, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Mannix Porterfield, a reporter who covered the events of that tragic day, later recalled the destruction left in the flood's wake as, quote, "It looked like a battlefield. It was like some foreign enemy had flown in and nuked the place. Debris was everywhere. Bridges were smashed to bits. Homes were left in splinters. Railroad tracks, yanked up and twisted. They looked like huge metallic pretzels." Porterfield also recalled the stance of survivors who were so shocked and traumatized at the happenings of the day that they were at a loss to express their emotions. He said, quote, "They just had this blank stare of resignation. One of my coworkers said that people in those coal communities were used to being battered by this and that. They're used to hard times. And this was just another little installment in the progression of a hard life, I guess." Dealing with mass destruction and flood victims. The massive task of caring for the flood victims began right after the flood subsided. Those who were killed needed to be collected, identified, and buried. Those who survived needed places to stay, clothing, food, medicines, and sanitation facilities. Many had lost everything in the flood and needed to be taken care of. The Salvation Army put its foot forward and provided over 190,000 meals, set up 5 different food and clothing distribution centers, arranged shelters out of grade schools, and assisted almost 4,000 families. Victims also face psychological trauma, such as post-traumatic stress disorder and survivor's guilt. The symptoms of these disorders frequently made themselves known in the children who survived. In many cases, children tried to hide and disappear within themselves, staring off into thin air. In contrast, in other situations, the children were so terrified and traumatized that sedatives were administered to calm them down. The traumatic experience and the psychological impact of surviving an event like the Buffalo Creek flood stayed with its victims for the rest of their lives. Nationwide help and support. Following the disaster, Logan County residents received heartwarming support from across the nation. Families and individuals sent their support to the people of the Buffalo Creek Valley in an attempt to alleviate some of the burden by sending much-needed commodities, be it food, clothing, medical aid, or even heartfelt letters and prayers. A sense of community arose from the nightmare, with people sending so much clothing to the destroyed communities that they had to ask people to stop. Governors and dignitaries wrote letters expressing concern for the people of Logan County. Organizations offered whatever they could, from generators to medical supplies for those who were suffering. Even American youngsters were doing whatever was in their limited capacity to help the flood victims by raising money through scouts or asking Governor Moore what they could do to help. The influx of aid supplies was so great that newspaper headlines announced the need for monetary donations instead of food, clothing, and other supplies, as the latter had been marked to provide more than enough, and now there was a need for a monetary influx. For this purpose, the Red Cross launched a special fund appeal channel for donation purposes. A Red Cross official stated, quote, "Monetary help is required to supplement expenditures for shelter and feeding, repair of homes, and to provide essential household furnishings, medical and funeral assistance, and other basic essentials traditionally provided to disaster victims." The government's response post-tragedy. The West Virginia state government didn't lag behind and was at the forefront of dealing with all the repercussions the flood had left behind. The state of West Virginia's offices dealt vigorously with emergencies and reacted quickly to the events that unfolded in Logan County after the mishap. The state police department deployed its teams, which moved in and set up a temporary morgue, protected the damaged property from further sabotage by looters, and categorically documented the damage as seen in the valley. The National Guard commenced search and rescue operations, assured safe evacuations of people stuck anywhere after flooding, and dedicatedly built the much-needed bridges and showers. The West Virginia Health Council arranged a staffed clinic that handed out typhoid vaccines, handled flood-related medical emergencies, and arranged for hospital transportation as and when needed. The Department of Highways surveyed the roads and organized cleanup equipment to help in mobility as much as the circumstances allowed. Recovery operations and new challenges. As soon as the immediate needs were fairly met, housing, redevelopment, and employment were giant tasks to be dealt with on a priority basis. Without proper housing arrangements, the surviving families were forced to stay in the shelters provided on the school premises, which further delayed the restarting of education. As a temporary initiative, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development provided trailers to the flood victims. As soon as some of the communities were cleared of debris, small neighborhoods of these trailers were put in place to move people from the school shelters to their makeshift homes. The rent of these homes was covered by the West Virginia government, and eventually the victims could own the trailers they were living in. The next big issue was generating income by creating employment opportunities. Without an income to support them, people could not begin the cycle of building their homes and lives. People were anxious to get back up on their own feet. They wanted to return to living independently and providing for themselves. However, the reality was that the area was disaster-stricken, and there were very few employment opportunities, which made the job market highly saturated. This necessitated the need for creating an office that could help people get employment, which led to the West Virginia government setting up offices that helped get people into jobs, such as working on the new highway construction projects. Redevelopment and recreation. Once the basic needs were fulfilled and people started to carry on their lives to some extent, requirements for recreational activities arose, which led to recreational projects being undertaken in the Creek Valley, often as suggestions from the youth. A petition was signed to build a swimming pool for the general public, and a grant was issued to accomplish it. Further, local kids expressed an interest in having a tennis court to enjoy, and another committee was established to raise the money. This led to different fundraisers being held, and businesses were more open to helping people in whatever way they could. The communities of the Buffalo Creek Valley were excited and a bit relieved to see the youngsters coming out of their trauma and expressing their interest in participating in something constructive. With all that the people have gone through after losing so much in the flooding, it was very heartwarming to see the youth coming up with exciting recreational ideas, and the government and authorities were more than eager to do all they could to fulfill the people's demands. The petition filed against the Pittston Coal Company. As could be foreseen, it wasn't long after the flood that the lawsuits were filed against the Pittston Coal Company, the party guilty and responsible for the slurry dams. One lawsuit was filed by the state of West Virginia, and the other class action lawsuit was filed by the victims, survivors of the flood. In March of 1972, following the Buffalo Creek case, 2 commissions were launched. The first ad hoc commission was established by Governor Moore to investigate the reasons for the failure of Dam No. 3. The commission was charged with determining who was at fault for the dam's collapse and the resulting loss of life and destruction of property. The commission consisted of 9 men with ties to the coal industry. It gathered witnesses, heard testimonies, and talked to experts in coal mining operations to best determine why the tragedy occurred, who was responsible for it, and how it could be avoided in the future. The second commission, the Citizens Commission, was established to counter this bias. The Citizens Commission found Pittston Coal reckless and negligent, and the state was negligent in ensuring safety compliance. In conclusion, the parent company of Buffalo Mining Company was blamed for the disaster happening in the first place. However, the commission did acknowledge that the lack of laws and regulations by the state and federal governments contributed to the dam's failure. The commission concluded that, quote, "No evidence of an act of God was found by the commission." The statement was in answer to the parent company's initial absolution of itself of the blaming, stating that the reasons were an act of God. Lawsuits filed and monetary settlement. Approximately 125 families and 600 individuals signed up to participate in the lawsuit filed against the Pittston Coal Company, represented by Arnold and Porter. The lawsuit broke a new record, addressing the psychological and communal losses suffered in the disaster alongside property and monetary losses. All plaintiffs above the age of 6 provided personal statements about their traumatic experiences. It included people who saw their loved ones getting drowned in the flood, who saw their homes being ripped apart in the tidal wave, and people who almost tasted death. Each person involved in the case was examined by both physicians and psychologists, and the effects of survivor syndrome and PTSD were observed in both children and adults. According to the argument made by Arnold and Porter, the plaintiffs of this case suffered extraordinarily, having lived through unspeakable horrors and having seen awful sights. Survivors were affected psychologically by the things that they had witnessed. Their lives had been halted. They had no homes, no belongings, and lost loved ones. With such a strong, valid argument, a cash settlement worth $13.5 million was agreed upon before the case went to trial. The plaintiffs received the whole amount, out of which $2 million was set aside for victims under the age of 18. As pro bono work, the Arnold and Porter firm exhausted thousands of work hours and created a foundation from some monetary funds from the settlement amount to rebuild the Buffalo Creek Valley. The foundation eventually helped build a community center equipped with the first fire station and created a new health clinic in the valley. However, the truth is that no dollar amount could erase the horrors of what happened at the Buffalo Creek flood for the survivors. Buffalo Creek still lives on with the legacy of generational trauma for survivors and their kin. Buffalo Creek today. A memorial was enacted in 1973 in memory of the flood fatalities. It is a scenic park with a picnic shelter, a podium, wooden benches, and a visitor's register. There is also a victims' monument, a small wall ingrained with the names of all of the unfortunate ones who lost their lives in the disastrous flood of 1972. The single building, designed in a certain way, has since grown to house a large children's room and a collection of more than 25,000 written, audio, and video documents, including those related to the flood itself. The Buffalo Creek watershed covers about 20 miles of stream. It is one of southern West Virginia's most popular trout fishing spots today. Since the 1972 flood, improved water quality and good fish habitats have changed the area, encouraging fishermen to visit and showcase the improved water quality. In conclusion, the Buffalo Creek disaster is still a complex and painful event to discuss. However, it is an outrageous example of an industry-wide attitude that values profits and production more than the health and safety of coal miners, their families, and their communities. We hope you liked this video. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you wish to see more such videos, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel and also hit that bell icon so that you never miss a new update. Thank you for watching.